Millennium Development Goals. And if you look at our performance in the Millennium Development Goals, you find out that in some areas we have done well, but in some areas we have not done well. So we are still lagging behind there. So a lot of jobs still need to be done on achieving the target set MDG, and we have 2015 just around the corner. Now, when I leave that, I go straight away to something that is very fundamental, and that is, what do you do with the rising number of unemployed people in this country? How do we grow our economy in a way that it will create jobs?
Well, we're still on the subject of that economic growth and economic development.
Yes.
What, in specific terms, what the federal government policymakers can, because I know they're looking at a number of options.
Yes.
What they can do specifically, perhaps things we haven't thought about.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at now. First of all, I'm looking at the situation where most of the current interventions are what they are, shock therapies. They will not get us to the promised land. So we need to begin to think holistically and fundamentally about how we can grow our economy to create jobs. One of the first things we need to do is to make sure that the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is a very key institution, is given a core mandate to promote full employment.
Apart from its outside of its
core mandate that is specified under the Act, the current legislation is talking about financial, is talking about price stability, exchange stability, and defending the value of the naira and all of that. And they've done that very well. But what we are saying is that some progressive economies have decided now. In fact, there's a conference going on right now that is looking at the dual mandate for central banks. And we can give examples. When the job numbers that you quoted about the United States came out, I know Bankabe was a bit, he was happy because he has a mandate. According to the U.S. legislation on Federal Reserve Act 1933, he must maintain maximum of full employment. So every job that is created in the United States is a joint responsibility of the central bank of that country, that's the Federal Reserve Bank, as well as the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Commerce. But here in Nigeria, we are more interested in inflation targeting and all that goes with it. Our monetary policy regime is targeted at bringing about price stability.
But the central bank could argue that in terms of it has embarked on some interventions, 200 billion here for agriculture, the aviation intervention fund, that for the manufacturing. It's burned some of the burden interest rates, especially with NERSA, what it did with agriculture, bearing the interest rate burden, sharing that with the banks. Yeah,
I am aware of that, but those are what they are. Interventions, things that you just do at your discretion, things that you do, you are not mandated to do it. For this to happen, I know the legislature, the National Assembly, is currently looking at the Central Bank Act, and that's one area they should look at. When you give a central bank a core mandate, and even there is a hierarchy of mandates, you have a situation where your desire to make sure that there is no unemployment in your country may be subsidiary to your desire to maintain price stability. As it's coming right now in Canada, for instance, one of the core mandates of the central bank is to say that you must maximize employment and provide for the welfare of the Canadian people. The same thing in Australia. So central banks, because of the strategic nature that they hold in the society, especially in a developing economy like ours, because they control the banks, if, for instance, if the Central Bank of Nigeria is interested in job creation, it will go beyond those interventions and ensure that each of the commercial banks in the country have a target for giving out loans to create jobs. For instance, when you talk about what is happening now, less than 2% interest rate in some of these advanced countries, in order to do what? To bolster, first of all, consumer spending and to encourage the producers, the manufacturers, to go and take loans. And that is being reflected in the performance of their stock exchange. But here, we have a situation where our stock exchange has started doing well again. I was a little bit fascinated by your report that right now we have added so many points. But what we are saying is that the points added in the United States and other advanced countries is as a reflection of the fundamentals of the economy. For example, jobs were added. You see share index going up. When this guy comes up to say, okay, I'm going to do more quantitative easing, I'm going to buy more bonds, you see what happened to the economy. So let us see a relationship between our macroeconomic fundamentals our capital market, and the creation of jobs.
How do you suppose the central bank can create jobs? Talking about perhaps tweaking the Central Bank Act, ensuring that that's part of its mandate. You mentioned Australia, Canada, and the rest of them, but what for a country like the US, the reason why they've been able to support the economy, especially the jobs market, is because interest rates are low, between 0 and 0.25%. We have an MPR of 12% here, and the central bank is not interested right now reducing that.
Sister, your interest rate is in a direct relationship to your inflation rate. Okay, when you look at the kind of inflation rate figures that we have in Nigeria, it will be difficult for the central bank. They will have to do it gradually, because when you look at our basket of goods and the consumer price index, all the time they are going up until recently. And I think if the price stability thing is being done properly now, the only thing that remains is to see this core mandate issue as very important and insert it into their legislation, so that we can hold him accountable for that as well. Right now, if he drops 200 billion with UBA or First Bank to promote agriculture, fine. He's just doing it. It is not part of the core mandate. So if it is part of his core mandate to promote maximum employment, we find out that an institution like Central Bank has enough capacity, human capacity, and it can develop it rapidly to cope with that in terms of advising entrepreneurs, doing a lot of other things where I'm going next. Straight away. But
hold your thoughts. We'll come back to talk more about that. So we need to take a break at this point. Very interesting point you brought up there, especially as regards to the Central Bank of Nigeria. I've been talking to Kola Ogunleye. He's an economic policy analyst, and we have been looking at some key economic issues right now in the economy. We'll take a break and we'll be right back.
Wherever and whatever your banking needs, Guaranty Trust Bank will be there, now and into the future. Because you're at the heart of everything we do. Guaranty Trust Bank, proudly African, truly international.
Welcome back to Business Morning. We're talking about the Nigerian economy. I've been talking to Kola Ogunleye. He's an economic policy analyst. Before I went on the break, you were talking about quite an interesting point that you brought up, talking about the fact that the central bank, apart from its core mandate of exchange and price stability, can actually have the mandate or the responsibility of ensuring that jobs are created in the country. Okay, fine. Let's hypothetically speaking say the Central Bank Act of 2007 is tweaked and that becomes the CBN's mandate. Where would the CBN start from in terms of aggressively creating jobs?
Yeah, the first thing that will happen is that the monetary policy regime that we have now, the set of interest rates that we have, will need to be rejigged, as it were, to ensure that we have an interest rate that can promote economic development and entrepreneurship. You know, the other day I asked Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala, I said, with the interest rate regime that we have in Nigeria now, is it possible for any businessman to really make success of his business? And he said, okay, this is being discussed with Malam Shanonsi and all that, because it's a big problem. But until you are able to rein in inflation,